Welcome to the We're Good podcast, where we are celebrating the everyday brilliance of people working toward a more positive world. If you're looking for the good that's taking place around you, you've come to the right place. Think back to a time when you had to stay up all night, be it for studying, a new baby, a work project. Now think about how great it felt when you got caught up on that lost sleep and fatigue. Well, for some families of children with special needs, those sleepless nights are all too common, and rest is a long-forgotten luxury. Today on We're Good, we're going to introduce you to an amazing organization, Jill's House, who strives to give rest, or respite as it's also called, to these very families. You'll hear from a Jill's House mom who says her son's Disney World experience and the love and care their whole family has received from Jill's House has been life-changing. Her words, not mine. Come on, let's meet the folks from Jill's House as we continue to share the good around us here on the We're Good podcast. Well, welcome to this latest edition of We're Good. I'm your host, Leanne Necessary, and we are so happy to have you two guests with us today. Joel Dillion, who is the CEO of Jill's House, which is a respite care center for children with intellectual disabilities and their amazing families. And also one of those amazing families, one of the moms, Kelly Speck, is joining us today, who is also the author of this wonderful book, Hope in the Heartache, a journey of grace and growth with a special needs child. Thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us, Leanne. It's an honor to be here.
We're so happy that you're here. I do want to say full disclosure that I have a long-time relationship with Jill's House. I've been a long-time volunteer. Know both of you very well, but we just wanted to share the mission and message, and no better place to do it than here on We're Good. So thank you for allowing me to have this conversation with you all.
Thank you.
Okay, Joel, I'm going to start with you because here at We're Good this season, we are starting with what's in a name.
Okay.
Because a lot of the organizations, nonprofits, foundations really work hard for their name to signify what their mission, their goal, where their heart is. So tell us, where did Jill's House come from?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having us here, Leanne. It's really a blessing. So Jill's House is named after Jill Solomon, who is the daughter of Lon and Brenda Solomon. Some of you in the area here may know the names Lon and Brenda Solomon. Lon was the senior pastor at McLean Bible Church, started in the early 80s and left around 2017. So long story short, Lon and Brenda had 3 boys, and they were raising these boys. And then Jill came along, and she was born perfectly healthy. But then a few months into her life, started having seizures, and not just like a seizure here or there, but like a dozen seizures a day. It turns out she has a genetic condition called Dravet syndrome. One of the symptoms of that is the seizure disorder, and those seizures left Jill with a lot of disabilities. So, Lon was running this church that was growing like crazy. Brenda was caring for these boys, and Jill came into their life, and they were thrilled to have this little girl. But it was really hard. It was a nonstop emergency for their family. They were running back and forth to the hospital, to the doctor's office, here, there, and everywhere, just trying to keep it all together. About 2 years into Jill's life, Brenda was really stressed out, as you can imagine, and fell onto the floor in a puddle of tears one day and just prayed something along the lines of, God, don't waste this pain. Use this. This really hurts. Use it for something good. And that afternoon, the phone rang. This was mid-90s, so it was a real phone, landline. Phone rang. Brenda picked it up, and there was a woman on the other end of the line who said, Brenda, my name's Mary. I'm part of the congregation. We don't know each other, but I felt led to call you. Can you tell me why that might be? And so Brenda saw this as an immediate answer to her prayer, and so told Mary, this woman, everything that was going on in their lives. And Mary listened, and what she said is, Brenda, here's what's going to happen. We're going to get some people together from the congregation to care for Jill so you and Lon can get a break. And so these people from the congregation started giving regular respite care to the Solomon family, and it revolutionized their lives. So Lon says it really well. He says that's when laughter came back into our household. So they've been getting this respite care and then started to think that, hey, there are probably a lot of other families who need something like this who aren't getting it. So I'll fast forward through all the details, but they started some ministries at McLean Bible Church to be more welcoming to people with disabilities and their families. And then around 2000, 2001, started to have a vision for what Jill's House could be, a place where people could come and drop their kids off for extended periods of time so they could get the breaks that most of us are used to. And that vision didn't become a reality until October of 2010. That's when Jill's House first opened its doors. But we've been here ever since, privileged to love and serve hundreds and hundreds of families here in the area, just like the Speck family, and a little bit around the country as well. So that's who Jill is. She's 32 years old now. My goodness. And is still living at home with mom and dad. But she's been a huge blessing and inspiration to so many.
And Jill's House has been an inspiration to so many. Respite care, can you just explain, and then I'll get to Kelly, can you explain just what it is when people bring their children, what is happening at Jill's House?
Sure.
And not only Jill's House, but now you have programs nationwide, which is so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, every parent knows this. We all need breaks, right? And for most families in America, my family included, we can call up babysitters. We can call grandma and grandpa to come for the weekend so that we can get a break. But for the families that we serve, that's really impossible. The care needs are just too complex to call up a babysitter or even to call up grandma and grandpa. So we have this amazing campus just outside of Washington, D.C. here. That's where we do most of our work. And kids with disabilities come to us for 24 to 48 hours at a time, several times throughout the year. We try to give them a Disney World experience while they're with us, something that they're going to look forward to and love and enjoy. We have a pool, we have a gym, we have a climbing wall, we have staff, most importantly, who just pour themselves into these kids to make sure that they are loved and celebrated. So kids get a great time while they're with us, and meanwhile, mom and dad get a break. They get to sleep through the night. They get to go on a date. They get to give undivided attention to their other kids. Again, those are most things that most of us take for granted, but are precious, precious life-giving gifts for the families that we serve. So we do most of our work here in the area, but have been privileged to be able to expand. We have a location in upstate New Jersey, one in Nashville, one in Chicago, one in Seattle. It looks like Dallas is up next late this year or early next, and we're able to provide respite care in those locations as well.
It's just amazing how it's grown. And of course, one of the families that's been impacted is the Speck family. And I, Joel says Disney World. It really is like Disney World over there. So Kelly, I know it's hard because you and I could talk for hours. But in a nutshell, tell us about your wonderful Bennett and his experience, your family's experience with Jill's House.
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Thank you so much. So I guess it begins with Bennett is our oldest child. And so my husband and I were both kind of two overachievers, landed in D.C. My husband was doing graduate school. I was working full-time to get him through graduate school. We found out we were pregnant. We were thrilled. I was hoping to have a baby, get a nanny, go to business school, and just live the D.C. dream. And long story short, we had a completely healthy pregnancy. And right towards the end, I was full-term, went into labor, and then all hell broke loose. And our baby was born, our son, Bennett, was born very sick, on death's doorstep, really. We were delivered at one hospital, transferred to Georgetown, spent 90 days there, and we were discharged with a baby boy who was alive, and we were so grateful for that. But he had significant brain damage. We knew a cerebral palsy diagnosis that turned into seizure disorder. And basically was just much more severe than I think anyone could have ever imagined. And so all of a sudden, all of our plans halted, and I quit my job, and I became a full-time nurse, and I had been a nerdy accountant. So I all of a sudden had to figure out how to handle a feeding tube and give meds, and our baby was screaming all the time because he was withdrawing from morphine, and it was just a nightmare. And so we were in pure survival mode, for sure, for the first 3 years. And we bopped around. We moved in with family in Virginia. We moved to Franklin, Tennessee, and thought we would just stay there forever in the beautiful hills in Tennessee. But God brought us back to DC. And ironically, our first, the day we visited McLean Bible Church was in the fall of 2010, the day they were dedicating Jill's House. I'm not even kidding. And we sat there, and at that point, Bennett was 3, but we had never spent a night away from him. We had never left him with a babysitter. At that point, his needs were so high. I mean, he, some sort of bodily fluid was always happening. We just didn't really feel comfortable leaving him with anyone. And we just sat there and thought, I wonder if one day he can go there. And the Lord in his mercy just literally, that was when Bennett was 3. And when Bennett was 7, he spent his first weekend at Jill's House. And anyway, there's a lot of steps that got us to there. But as my husband has said many times to Joel, and I think Lon as well, Jill's House saved our marriage, saved our family. We had been so just isolated. We didn't even know how isolated we were. because we're like, no one can understand how crazy our life is. And then all of a sudden we found Jill's house, and they maybe didn't understand, but they were willing to walk alongside and just join us in this wild journey and never judge us, always with a smile on their face and always thrilled to see our son. When a lot of times in this world, people don't really know how to interact with Bennett, but Jill's house has it nailed. And it's just nothing but love. And we're just so grateful for it.
And of course, you write about it in this beautiful book, Hope and the Heartache. And you write about getting ready to take Bennett to Jill's house. Could you read an excerpt for us today?
So this would have been, I think this would have been 2014. And I say, as I packed up Bennett's bag, gathering all his clothes, diapers, wipes, medical supplies, formula, prescription, and favorite toys, feelings of guilt, dread, and panic came over me. What are we doing? What were we thinking? How could we leave him for 2 nights with complete strangers? What if he had a seizure? What if he choked on his formula and they didn't see him choking? In my head, I knew we were not being selfish for taking Bennett to Jill's house. They had a full-time nurse caring for him, trained fellows, and a doctor on call at all times. And yet my heart wrestled with the fact that caring for Bennett was my job, and I was having a hard time handing him over. This artist makes me cry to sing it. I knew every move he made, every sound that came out of his body. I could tell the minute a sickness was settling in his lungs by the gurgle of his breathing or the number of coughs he had. So sorry. And yet this was the time and the safe place to let Bennett take baby steps into the care of others. He had been attending school for 4 years. He'd been under the care of other professionals for years, and he was doing great. Any guilt or grief that I had was completely normal, and yet my marriage with Travis needed to be a priority. This was a perfect time to seize this opportunity and go celebrate my man's 37th birthday. It's so funny. We were so young. So we rolled Bennett into Jill's house on that dark autumn night. We stopped in front of the large roaring fireplace. Jill's house is designed to look like a cozy ski lodge. And we gave him kisses goodbye. Bennett looked around, probably wondering what in the world was going on. But his sweet attendant quickly vocalized for him, "Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. Have a great first respite weekend." And off he went.
And so the story continues when you picked him up. What was he like?
Oh, my goodness. I mean,
thank you for sharing.
Sure. It's so crazy, and it's so hard to put words. So Bennett is nonverbal. I probably didn't add that. So he does not have words to express, hi, Mom, hi, Dad, my stomach hurts, I'm tired. We kind of always just have to read his cues. So if he's happy, he's giggling. If he's mad, he's screaming like a banshee. And every time, I literally, every time we pick him up from Jill's house, I just explain it as he's covered in this piece. He is loved on and doted on, like he's the Prince of Sheba. But it's the love and just the attention and the nurture that, he's not crying, he's not screaming, he's just covered in total peace. And we've had people who come in our home outside of Joel's house say, "What's going on with him?" They notice the change in him. And so that's where I just feel like these vessels of Joel and his amazing staff, they are truly just special vessels of love and goodness. And that's, I love that your podcast we're good, because I think we're just chasing the good now and realizing there's so many good people out there who are willing to just love on our kids and walk alongside us.
It's so wonderful. Kelly, thank you for sharing that out of the book too. And there's so much more in there I wish we could share, but that story in particular is just so touching. And I know, Joel, you're touched by it. And the Specks are just one example of all the Jill's House families. I know you've probably become very close with a lot of those families. They really gather together. They really can connect, which is another connection, which is another thing that the podcast is about connecting people. But you actually have something that's in the works right now where you're going to see, it's all been all about saving marriages, saving families. But now this new study, can you share with us a little bit about where you're going to be able to quantify what's working and how it's working, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for sharing. That was awesome to hear. And it's just a privilege to be a part of your family's life. So as I mentioned, we opened in 2010. So we're almost 14 years old now. And we've collected a lot of quantitative and qualitative data over the years about, service quality. We want to get better at everything that we do and make sure that our services are top notch. But we wanted to take that kind of deep look at Jill's House to the next level. So we connected with Dr. Eric Carter and Dr. Sarah Meyer at Baylor University. Dr. Carter heads up the Baylor Center for Developmental Disabilities, this large research center that focuses on all things disability. And we asked them if they could take a real deep quality third-party look at Jill's House and the impact of what we do. So for about the last year, we've been going through this study with them. So they did surveys of several hundred of our families. And then the next piece of that was about 30 in-depth interviews with some of our families. Those interviews lasted a couple hours each to get some real deep insight into how Jill's House has impacted their families. So we're really excited about this. We've never done anything like this before, and I don't think anyone else has, which is kind of cool. So we are going to learn a lot about Jill's House. We're going to learn a lot about the families we serve. We're going to learn some things that in areas where we may have fallen short and where we can get better, but that's really going to help us just love and serve our families better. So we're going to start to see the results from this research study this fall. Ultimately, there will be some articles in peer-reviewed journals, which I'm really excited about as well. And hopefully, not only will allow us to learn more and to improve our services, but I'm really hopeful that this can serve as a guide for other organizations around the country, other people to pick up this kind of work and realize the kind of impact that can be made. So we're super excited about partnering with Dr. Carter and Dr. Meyer and Baylor University on this study.
Because I love what you say, Jill. You'll say, we don't want to corner the market in respite care, right? We want to share this news. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on as guests, to let people know that Jill's House is there, but also if somebody was listening and wanted to get in touch with you to see how they can help in their own community.
Yeah, absolutely. So we need partners of all kinds at Jill's House. So we need volunteers. We need people just like you, Leanne, who come alongside us to help in so many different ways, whether that's working directly with the kids or helping out in the kitchen or at the front desk or with our fundraising events. There's all kinds of ways to get involved. So if there are any listeners out there who are interested in that, jillshouse.org, just click on volunteer, fill out the form. I guarantee there's a live person on the other side of that form who will get back to you and find a good way to get involved. We need people to give. We have about a $6.5 million budget. Well over 80% of that comes from private donations, people who give $10, $100, $1,000, $100,000 a year and beyond. We are so blessed to have people at all of those levels. So we need people to come alongside us and make this possible. As you mentioned, we don't need a Jill's House empire. I want to grow. I want to serve more families. I want to get bigger and I want to serve in more locations. That would be amazing. But we want to help others love and serve these same families, maybe in places that we won't be or in ways we might not imagine or that we couldn't do. So there aren't many weeks that go by where we don't get contacted by some organization who wants to learn a little bit about what we do. And as you mentioned, Leanne, we are happy to share any knowledge or experience that we've gained over the years. If nothing else, we just want to help people not make the same mistakes that we've made over the years. So, Jill's House, there's nothing proprietary about it. It belongs to God, not to us. And so we are happy to give away anything that we've learned over the years to help people love and serve families like the Specks. So.
Yeah, and Kelly, they do love and serve at Jill's House. They also celebrate the kids, which I love. And in your book, you call yourselves the Hot Mess Express. So tell us how you found the love at Jill's House to be just different. I mean, people will try to help. Sometimes they may say, or, how they talk with you about your family. But how's it different at Jill's House?
It is so different. And, yes, we had 3 kids, and we ended up having 3 kids in 5 years and had 3 kids in diapers. It was just a hot mess express all the time. And anywhere we went, we were a traveling circus. And I'll never forget, one of the great things about Jill's House is they have family Christmas parties. They have special nights that are only for the siblings, because a lot of times, then it gets to go to Jill's House and experience the moon bounce and the music and the Disney World experience. And the 2 quote unquote typical siblings are like, hey, wait, there's an indoor pool? When do we get to go to Jill's house? And so the really neat thing is Jill's house says, hey, guess what? We're going to have a siblings night, and only the siblings get to go. You guys get some attention. And so, Jill's house really does serve the entire family, and I know they do marriage retreats and just things that we haven't been able to participate in. But I remember the family Christmas party. I'll never forget it, because usually going to a social event with people who don't have children with disabilities, we're kind of always just like, walking on eggshells and waiting for, the next mess to clean up. And I just remember seeing a mom with a screaming teenage son, and she was literally doing laps. And I think there was, just a lot going on there. And I've never felt more seen. And I thought, that's going to be me when Bennett's a teenager, because my Bennett can be pretty feisty, and especially in loud, oversensory situations where there's people everywhere. And I just felt so comforted of like, I thought I was the only one who has to do that kind of crazy stuff. And look, she's there and she's managing, and her sibling, the siblings are running around and they're making a, Christmas tree, and Santa's over there and there's gifts. And so as messy as our life is and can be, they say the most important 2 words in the American language are me too, right? And so all of a sudden realizing, there's other people who feel like hot mess express, perhaps too. And so we've gotten to know several of them. I mean, we live in actually Maryland, across the river from Jill's house in Virginia. And we ran into a family at Bennett's school who was a Jill's house family. We had no idea. And so anyway, just the connections that immediately you just feel so bonded, even though we didn't know a thing about them personally. It's been such a gift.
Tell us about the rest. What does respite do for a family? Like, what's something that kind of puts it in context for like other families that might not understand what that kind of rest does?
Well, I think one thing, a lot of people don't realize is just that a lot of times kids with disabilities, and when I say that, or special needs, that's such a wide spectrum. I mean, so many different diagnoses, but just a lot of those kids don't sleep or they definitely don't sleep through the night. You might get small chunks. And anyway, I think respite for one thing is just a full night's sleep, knowing your child is safe, that they are not going to run out the front door or, aspirate on their secretions. And so for us, it's rest, and it's such a weird feeling because Bennett is not verbal and cannot speak, but when he is at Jill's house, our house is so quiet. It almost rattles. Because normally we have his favorite videos playing nonstop. There's kind of always some chords. And so it's this quiet that at first feels uncomfortable. Like a lot of times I'll be like, oh my goodness, Travis, like it's too quiet. I miss him. But in a way, I think like our spirit and our souls need that quiet. And we don't know that we need that because we don't have it unless Bennett is at Joe's house, quite honestly. And so that's what I would say respite means to us, in addition to really spending the time with our other 2 children. And I think those little kids are now a tween and a teen. And so we are in a whole new, I would just say, family evolution of kind of their needs and how hard it is to be a sibling of a child with disabilities. And I think the siblings are so, strong and compassionate, and just they have to learn from a very young age that the world doesn't revolve around them because they have a sibling with high needs. But Jill's house just has a way of giving us that time and space to focus on them. And sometimes they do need to be the center of our world. And so that is one of the things I'm really most grateful for Jill's house right now, because on the weekends that Bennett goes to Jill's house, we can focus on the basketball tournament and actually going out to lunch afterwards and not being afraid that Bennett's going to scream or need us, or we'll have to cut lunch short, or, and so it's just kind of that normalcy that the siblings crave and don't get a lot that has been such a gift to us even more recently.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's for the whole family, really, right?
Definitely.
And of course, you focus on marriages, but it's the whole family, right, Joel?
Yeah, it's easy to conceive of Jill's House as a disability organization or disability ministry, and that's not wrong. But what we really are is a whole family ministry. We're here to love and serve and nourish the whole family, and all the families we serve just happen to have one thing in common, which is a child with an intellectual disability. So we want to love mom and dad and the typical siblings and the kids with disabilities. And one thing that our team does so well, and you touched on it, and I'm glad to hear that. That it's working. Our team at Jill's House, they don't view kids with disabilities, kids like Bennett, they're not problems to be solved. They're not obstacles to be overcome. They're people to be loved and celebrated just as they are. And our team does that so well. And it makes a huge difference for our families, makes a huge difference for the kids with disabilities, not to be, a second thought. They're the first thought at Jill's House. So often kids with disabilities are pushed to the side. They get the leftovers. They're getting, second best, whatever it might be. But at Jill's House, we're rolling out the red carpet for these kids. And, it's a privilege to be a part of that and to see that it makes a difference in the lives of our families, and just can't be more complimentary of our team and our direct care staff, our nurses, everybody up and down the organization who goes out of their way just to really provide these families with the very best.
And also the families that come to Jill's House are from all walks of life, right? It's not, it's open to all.
Yep.
Jill's House.
Yeah. So disability doesn't discriminate, right? So, we see people from all over the economic spectrum, from every ethnicity, from every imaginable background. And as long as someone's child has an intellectual disability and can be safely served at Jill's House, they're going to be unconditionally loved, welcomed, and served regardless of any characteristic. And, we feel that that's what God has called us to do. That's precisely because of our faith in Jesus Christ that we want to serve everybody and love everyone. And it's just, it's fun to see people come together in community, as Kelly mentioned. Our families report one of the things we hear so frequently is how socially isolating it can be to have a child with a disability. And so for our families to be able to get together, whether it's a Christmas party or a retreat or even just our dad's burgers and beers night, stuff like that, where they can be with other families and they don't have to explain themselves. They don't have to try to, describe what it's like. These other families already get it. And I think that's something that's really refreshing, and some unique value that Jill's House can offer beyond the respite is that community of people who know and care for one another.
And Kelly, you and I were talking a lot of times outside the doors of Jill's House, if people are, they have friends or they see someone at a restaurant and they have a child with special needs, what are some ideas, some things that you can share with people about things that have meant a lot to your family?
Yes, that's a great question. I think, well, number one, just saying, hi, Bennett, 'cause I think a lot of people feel very uncomfortable, or I don't want to scare them, and we're, there's really nothing you can do to harm. I think just acknowledging like, hey there, just like you would to the other two siblings or my husband. But also, a lot of times, as when Joel said, the other parents just get it, that being, you could have had the worst, you could have been in the hospital last weekend, quite honestly. A lot of disability families, they'll be like, oh yeah, I was at Children's last weekend. I mean, that's just normal because, you're bopping in and out for respiratory virus or whatever. So a lot of times for me, when people just say, how's Bennett doing today? It's just like, I can answer that. I can't tell you how the week's been, the month's been, the years, but I can tell you how today's going. If I'm here, we're good. He's having a good day, and just kind of just like, staying in the present, I think, is just, and a smile, even if it's just a smile, I'll never forget, we were standing in line at some like taco takeout place, and a woman said, I like your son's wheelchair. And I was like, oh, I'd never been told that before. I've heard, I like your purse, and I said, well, thank you. And she said, my son used to have one like that. And I realized quickly that her son is no longer with her. Instantly that I just wanted to hug her. I wanted to cry, but I also I was just so grateful that she did say hi, because as we all know, everyone is walking around with something, we all have our hard thing. And anyway, I feel like there's just so many good people out there and they have good intentions, but sometimes, it's a messy life and people just kind of don't know what to say or do. And that's where Jill's House is so beautifully just walk alongside us. They're not telling us what to do, and they are not coming into our house and trying to clean up the mess. No one can, but they're just saying, we're going to meet you where you are. And we want to love on your kids, celebrate your kid. Oh, and by the way, mom and dad, like, make sure you guys are okay. And so I think that like walking alongside the journey is just, there's nothing more comforting.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then, Joel, we wanted to close out because you just talked a little bit about what keeps Jill's House going.
Yep.
But we're also asking people, our guests, if, especially our CEOs, our people that are heads of organizations, if someone were to call you up or walk into Jill's House and say you can have X amount of dollars, where would that money go? So what is your need at Jill's House?
Yeah, so we are so privileged to be able to serve several hundred families here in the area. And as I mentioned, several hundred more across the country. But there's probably 40, 50,000 families just in the DC area alone we could be serving, and probably 2 to 3 million around the country who we could be serving. So we are just scratching the surface of the need that's out there. So, if that blank check came in, man, it would allow us to hire more staff, hire more nurses. That's our biggest constraint. So having the money to hire the direct care staff, to hire the nurses, the administrative staff that it takes to serve these families safely and well, and to make sure that we have that safe, loving, celebratory environment, which is so important. So, that's our big constraint. As I mentioned, we're grateful to have the $6.5 million budget that we do, but we want to go way beyond that. And to what we discussed earlier, that would allow us to open ourselves up to other organizations and help them as well. We are, and that's actually not just here in America, but, we're privileged to connect with organizations all around the globe. I'm working with organizations in Ukraine right now, in Armenia, and several other places around the world that are doing amazing services for people with disabilities on a shoestring budget. So that blank check, it would allow us to serve so many more families like the Specks. It would make a huge difference.
We just appreciate you both being here today. We hope someone's listening that wants to plug in some way. There's so many ways to plug in, as Joel already shared, the wonderful jillshouse.org, and we'll be sharing that also on our website and the podcast. And Kelly, your book is wonderful. It is a great read for anyone that just is wanting to find about families and connection and going through something in your life. So thank you for sharing your time. That's actually hopeandtheheartache.com if you want to know more about the book. And we just really appreciate both of you all being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. This was a joy.
Such an honor.
Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank all of you joining us today who are listening or watching. Be sure to follow We're Good on Spotify, Apple Music, or any service where you get your podcasts. And if you've enjoyed our podcast today, please follow We're Good as we continue to seek the good that is out there in the world. Until next time, celebrate goodness by inspiring, connecting, and giving back, because we're good and you're good. Thanks for joining us.